Welcome to another edition of Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and I had originally intended to start off the show with like a rock zing and a fleur-de-lis zing for my co-host and guest, but they're just too nice, so I didn't want to do that to them. Instead, I'll just say welcome to my power duo ally, Jessica Lewis, and our guest today, who was her actual super solid ally from Millennials versus Gen X, the winner of that season, Adam Klein.
Hello. I was like, wait, that's my power duo ally.
Yeah.
I know, right? And unfortunately, very few people actually know that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the show, so it's,
Talk about editing.
we know the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah, we've actually talked on the podcast about how close you two were on the show, but that none of that was on TV.
Right.
And that's, of course, something that can't really happen on Big Brother. But I don't know that either of you would want to trade being on the live feeds all the time for getting the full story shown.
No. I think I've begun to appreciate so much more that our show happened after we were out in the island, so we had time to kind of ponder and think about what was going to be seen. And that, yes, not all of it was seen, because that would have been horrifying.
I was just so wrong about what would be seen anyway. So
oh yeah, I mean, you would live in fear every Wednesday, be like, oh my god, what are they going to actually play today? Like what and then but at least it wasn't your family wasn't experiencing it without you sitting there, so you couldn't forewarn anyone about what was about to happen. So yeah, it's a whole different thing.
I wonder how many Survivor players have like called up one of their castmates and said, okay, look, I apologize for what you're going to see tonight, and then not had that air.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that
funny
happens.
Oh, funny story.
Okay.
Here we go. So it's premiere night. I have some friends over. We're getting ready to watch the show. My phone rings and it's Ken. And Ken proceeds to apologize to me for things that he and David allegedly said about me. And It was really, really horrific. And I was just kind of blown away, because I thought, well, why would you say these terrible things about me? And you're telling me now, like 10 minutes before the show is about to air. And then he was just God.
Yes,
he was just trying to give me like a heart attack.
I can't imagine either of them doing that.
I know. And that's why I was so shocked when I heard it. And then he was like, Jessica, I'm just messing with you. We didn't say any of those things. I couldn't believe it, because I was so frustrated and upset. And then he was like, just kidding. So yeah.
I probably got the idea from an actual call from like Chris or somebody.
Probably. Yeah. So that was my experience with that actually happened to me, but it was a joke. Yeah.
Now, Adam, so people don't know this, but it's very appropriate that we have you as a guest, because you are actually the first person to suggest to me that we have guests. We were in Reno talking, and you brought it up. Now, it took a little while for it to happen, but it was always rattling around in my brain, even if it wasn't in yours anymore. So you succeeded in planting an Adam seed, and now here we are.
Great. I'm trying to. Have I done a Big Brother podcast before? I'm not sure that I have, but I've been watching it since season 3 live. So yeah, I know it's a little embarrassing. Big Brother is my guilty pleasure show. Like, I have always been proud of watching Survivor, even when other people think that I should feel like guilty or ashamed about it. But I've always been genuinely ashamed of being a Big Brother fan.
That's amazing.
And now you're out.
Now everyone knows.
I mean, it's a show that like has so much potential. I really believe that the concept is great, and the strategy has so many potential implications for it to be incredible. Mm-hmm. And then year after year, you just get disappointed more and more and more. But you still watch in the hopes that one day something spectacular is going to happen. And then it doesn't.
Or they're riding bananas.
Or they're what?
Riding bananas.
riding bananas.
Don't you
Yes,
remember
from
that from the first episode this season? They were riding on huge bananas.
I didn't even know which I thought you were like riding banana.
No, riding, like, yeah, they were actually riding on them.
Riding bananas. I was like, are bananas riding now?
But listen, this is the problem with Big Brother, I've noticed. Okay. I have watched intermittently. Like and now I'm watching obviously every episode, and I've never been exposed to the live feeds until this season. But my family has never been exposed to Big Brother, and now they are being exposed. And every time something like that happens, they just look at me and they're like, "Why are we watching this show?"
Oh, that was my parents. Every time I would watch it, they would see some ridiculous competition. They'd be like, "What garbage are you watching?" Or somebody's like making out in a showmance, and they're like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "No, it has real strategic implications."
Yeah,
like, okay,
yeah. So it's definitely
that
its
one
own
I never
thing,
got my
sure.
family to watch with me. I've been watching Big Brother alone. Well, now Kaylee watches it with me, but for the better part of my life, I've watched Big Brother alone in the basement. Which is, I think, where most people watch Big Brother, probably.
Yes,
so funny,
yeah,
like under
I
a blanket, like
do,
hiding.
yes, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, for anyone, just to let anyone who is new to the podcast, each week, I'm going to talk about what we do. We look at the player who was voted out and analyze their gameplay using what we saw on TV, live feeds, interviews.
David, it's evicted.
Yes. Well, they were
out of Big Brother.
They get voted out and they're evicted. You know, synonyms.
They're comps, not challenges.
Yes, that you have to. You're right. Yeah, you're a comp beast. You're not a challenge beast. You know?
That's right.
That's
true.
Very important distinction.
Yes.
For sure.
So we watch. We collect all this information. We compare everything about their game to a set of guiding rules I originally wrote back in 2004 and have modified since, including the most recent version at robhasawebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. This week, of course, we're looking at Devon, who has become a true Big Brother icon, though not necessarily for her gameplay. Still, unlike many players we've seen in recent years, Devon has been a fan since she was a kid. And even now, as many viewers get turned off by the actions this season and last in particular, she does seem to remain a fan, at least, per her interviews as she left.
Now, I do think that Devon has come into this house with a kind of larger than life attitude about the show Big Brother. She's always been very vocal about how much she loves it. She continues to be very vocal about how much she loves it. And I do think that she has left a lasting impression on anyone and everyone who watches Big Brother because of the way that she presents herself and the way that she has presented herself. She's very impressive. And I think she was very mindful of that when she came into the house this time, that she wanted to play differently than she did before because she wanted to leave a different mark on the game. And I think she's done that. I really think she has.
Yeah, I agree. Now, a couple of weeks ago when we discussed why Bailey lost, I talked about how the rules interacted with her being a Black woman in this game. And we have a very similar situation this week. For those who might not have listened to that podcast or, didn't remember, I'll quote myself and say it is possible for more than one thing to be true at the same time. Devon can be the target of conscious or unconscious racism while also having made mistakes within the game. I said at the time, I can't have a rule saying don't be in the house with a-holes. Or I would add one that says only be in the house with people who share and understand your background, because neither of those are anything that a player has control over. As I said last time, production has control over that, but that's a whole different thing. The rules stand on their own. Unfortunately, some people just have a steeper hill to climb to follow because of bias from others in the game. And that's the reality of where we find ourselves again this week.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah. But before we actually get to the rules in Devon, there are several things to discuss about the week in general, like Memphis and his second attempt of turning HOH into the role of dictator, as he refused to tell people his plan, then demanded that they do whatever he told them to, whether it was throwing the veto comp or voting his way. I don't understand how he believes this is a good strategy to win the game.
I do feel like he's spending a lot of time trying to distance himself from the people that he is in an alliance with. And I think he's presenting himself to the other people in the house as this lone soldier, if you will. Like this is his fight that he's fighting all by himself, and comes up with these plans. And I don't know if that's the point of it, is that if he tries to minimize the information that he's sharing, he's also minimizing his exposure to actually being part of this large group of 6. I'm curious if that's the reason for it, because it doesn't seem to make much sense otherwise.
I think he's also setting himself up, like, even if everything that he wants happens, I don't watch live feeds, so I don't know in depth what everybody's thinking, but I have to imagine that in most cases, he's not beating Enzo at the end, right?
I agree.
I don't think so, but I mean, that's one. I mean, he's created several of several final threes, including with Enzo. And I think he wants to go to the end with Enzo. But the thing is that maybe he doesn't understand the reason people are eager to go to the end with him is they would beat him.
Right. I mean, right. But for Enzo, this is perfect. It's kind of like the dream alliance is someone who thinks that they can beat you, and you know that you can beat them, and they're loyal for that reason. Because if somebody really believes that they can beat you at the end, they have no incentive to ever turn their back on you. Right. So Enzo's in a really good position if people think that he's beatable at the end, when in reality he seems to have strong relationships across the board. But what I will say for Memphis, it's not necessarily great strategically what he's doing, but I find Memphis to be pretty entertaining relative to the rest of his alliance, just simply for the fact that he's willing to do something different. So much of Big Brother over the last 6 maybe or so years has been follow the group, do what the group does, stay quiet, like cause no waves. And so the fact that he's willing to cause waves, that's what I like to see in casting for Big Brother. And I think part of it is, you know, he's a little bit older and he doesn't really care like exactly what people think. And I think that has hurt him in terms of what people think, probably. But it's made for more entertaining television than someone who is super highly conscious of the fact that everyone's watching, and by trying so hard to filter themselves, they end up being less likable. And so I don't know. I at least like that he's doing something different than what everybody does all the time.
Yeah. Now I know you said you don't watch live feeds, but you probably saw this online. He could have done a better job of filtering himself in several cases, such as when he was making fun of Ian and stuff like that. But yeah, he has, as you said, gotten to this point where I don't think that his own alliance particularly likes him. And I think even Christmas has a fighting chance against him at the end. And I don't know that we could say that about anyone else when it comes to Christmas. So, I mean, it would be I was just listening to a different podcast. I think it was the Thursday night recap, and they were talking about this, and it would be the worst final 2 ever for viewers, the Christmas and Memphis final 2. But for each other, it's like, those might both be the only person they could possibly beat. Right.
And I do think that part of Memphis's issue is, yes, he's very entertaining necessarily because he's switching it up, as Adam was talking about, that he's not just following the group. He's kind of doing his own thing. And so he's making more things for the viewer to enjoy and to kind of guess, like, what's going to happen? Is this plan going to work? But he's kind of being condescending in the manner in which he's presenting it to the people in the house. So it's this weird thing that might work when you're watching the show as far as entertainment value, but it's going to work against you potentially in the house because people are not going to necessarily like the way that you treated them while you were in the house. So I feel like he's going to end up struggling in that regard.
It might help him get really far in the game and potentially even to the final two again, though.
Oh, for sure. But will people be upset with him because of the way that he treated them if he makes it to the final two?
He's not winning. Right.
Yeah.
Now, Adam, I have a feeling.
You never know.
I have a feeling that you had fairly recent experience in a situation where people didn't want to make waves and just wanted to do whatever the group wanted, but maybe you wanted to do things a little differently. Am I?
Yeah, I mean,
ring any bells? Yeah.
Well, I definitely think I was surprised, and again, like just like this is an all-star season, and people are surprised by that kind of play. I was really surprised by that kind of play on Winners at War, and I think you have to credit the people that benefit from that kind of gameplay, like Tony and Sarah, who were keeping the status quo is good for them. And you have to wonder, like, why I still don't fully understand, why people played relatively safe in a game where getting second or third place is even less valuable relative to first than it has ever been before. Like first place was doubly as valuable, $2 million up top. And so if you're not doing everything you can to get to that number one, regardless of what that means for like your placement outside of the number one, if you're not successful, then I just don't get that, especially when you've already won. Like, I think you don't have much to lose, but I actually think a lot of people felt like they did have a lot to lose in terms of their legacy, their reputation, whatever. And getting voted out early or taking a big risk that ends up looking like kind of like what JT has done a couple times on Survivor, where he takes big swings and twice they haven't worked out. And then people online who think they know everything say, wow, JT's such an idiot. But if it works, JT wins again. And JT isn't going to be able to win again by sliding by. That kind of person who has a big target on their back sometimes needs to take a big punch. So, but they get a lot of vitriol and they get a lot of people saying, wow, you're such an idiot. And so there's definitely a risk, not only within the game, but also with the hit that you might take outside of the game. And I think that really makes a big difference in terms of how people decide to play on a kind of all-star season.
Yeah.
Well,
I loved it when you tried to play the podium. I thought that was genius because if it had worked, if it was a thing, like you said, I mean, that would have been just an incredible moment. And it made sense because you had been watching International Survivor too. So it's not like this was outside of the realm of possibility at all.
Well, that one was a no-brainer. There was no downside to going for it. But I also took other risks in the game that did backfire and that did put me in a worse position than I did otherwise. If I could take some of those moves back, I would, now knowing what happens. But at the time, I felt like those were the right decisions because I knew I needed to do a lot in order to win a season like All Winners Survivor. I knew that I was coming into the game with a relatively low threat level, and that there weren't maybe a ton of people that I would beat at the end if I just like played a safe game. So I was trying to keep some of those people safe and in the process make myself more in control and have a better chance to actually like get to the end. But by taking those risks, you put yourself in danger. And I definitely think I could have gotten farther in the game by laying low and being quieter. Would I have won? No way. I would not have. But I could have gotten farther.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that that's what people struggle with when they're in an all-star season. And I think that that's what we're seeing now in Big Brother. Everyone had this idea that the all-star season was going to be full of people who really wanted to play the game, but we're seeing the same things that we've been seeing for years. And I think it's disappointing because we were all kind of hoping that they would be coming in with gusto, and they're just not doing that.
I will say, though, that I do think that the people left are really playing the game and have been playing it well, because of who's been winning challenges. If any of the
competitions
people are still in, I'm sorry. It's so funny because every time I talk to like a friend that has been on Big Brother and they talk to me about Survivor, they say like, what are the comps like? Do you enjoy? And it's so funny because they refer to Survivor challenges as comps, and now here I am referring to Big Brother comps as challenges. The lingo sticks with you no matter what show you're on. But because of who's won these comps, it would have been a big mistake for any of these people to deviate from this big majority alliance. And I think someone from the minority, if someone from the minority won, then maybe the big alliance starts to break itself down because everyone's trying to stay safe with that person in the minority. Right. And in doing so, they might have to reveal some secrets and information that never gets revealed when the majority continues to win over and over and over again, because there's no incentive to reveal that information during a week in which that majority has the power. You reveal that information when the majority is scrambling to stay alive. Mm-hmm. And it's just unlucky for the viewers, I think, that no one from the minority has won a head of household the entire season. I mean, you look at like which season had like level 6 and Food 20, right? 2 years ago. So that season was fascinating because you had the minority, or what turned into the minority, actually winning some competitions, but they were so bad, and level 6 was so good that I enjoyed that season a lot. Actually, it got a ton of like people like complained all the time because that's what they do, but it was fascinating to watch this alliance that was so good just run over this alliance that was so bad, even though the alliance that was so bad was doing all right. This is bad because of who is winning the challenges, the competitions, and that's really, I think, what it boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, going back to something that you said earlier about, the $2 million being so much higher than second place. I think that goes to it speaks to the tournament poker player, because anyone who plays tournament poker knows that very frequently, the payouts are top heavy, which means most of the money is in first place. And so there are some well-known pros who, they'll make the money and they'll get some amount of money, enough to keep them going from competition, from tournament to tournament. But other pros play to get first. And if that means they get knocked out, early on or in the middle rounds, then they get knocked out. But in their minds, they're going to get first more often. And that's where the big money is.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. I think if you're playing, I think it is easier to have that philosophy if you play a ton, you play all the time.
Right.
In Survivor, every time you play, you have to play with the anticipation that this is the last chance I will ever get to play Survivor and win this kind of money. And so it changes. Like it's like when you have a 16 against a 10 in blackjack, like if this is your only hand you're ever going to play, you might like play it safer because you don't want to bust or whatever. But in the long term, if you're playing thousands and thousands and thousands of hands, you just go by the book and you do whatever you're supposed to do, and even if it means taking on a bigger risk, like doubling down a hand or something, because in the long term, it's better. But when you're on a show like this, it feels like this is your only chance, and for most people, it is.
Right.
And so it changes your mind in a way that is not really beneficial to actually giving yourself the best chance to win.
Mm-hmm. We picked rocks, Adam.
But that was like the right decision.
It was. And that's what people have said, you know, in all of the discussions I've had and trying to explain why we went to rocks and why we ended up picking rocks, because there was no other choice. If you flipped in that moment, you're not winning the game. And I went there to win, just like you went there to win. And that's it. And if you're sitting next to someone who flipped, what are they going to be said? Oh, well, that person flipped. They weren't willing to make the ultimate risk. I was. And it's a game losing move if you end up flipping in a moment like that. And I do think that what you're saying is completely on point, is that these are the games where if you want to win, I mean, we talk about big moves all the time. You need to have something for people to focus on and look at. And someone like Memphis, he's trying to make moves. He's also leading that pack of 6 pretty well and being more creative than I think any of the other 6. So maybe it will bode well for him in the end if all of those other 5 are sitting in the jury house and having to look at him sitting as a final 2. It might actually work well for him, but it's all going to depend upon who's sitting next to him for sure.
Yeah. And it's not just a resume building thing. It's also about just setting up the game in a way that is advantageous, the way that's beneficial to getting to the end in a position where you are the person that gets the votes, if that makes sense. So I think sometimes people misunderstand when I talk about this kind of stuff as like new school resume building philosophy, and that's not it at all. It's just sometimes you need to take a risk in order to put yourself in that winning position, not just for how it looks.
Right.
Oh yeah.
All right. A couple other things that happened this week. Two people who have been digging their holes deeper, Danny and Nicole, neither of whom has been convincingly sneaky in their attempts at making a side alliance. Now, we'll talk about how that impacted Devon later, but I think Danny in particular is not long for this game.
You think so?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that she's obviously upsetting the 6, and people are looking at her as a potential target for someone else to potentially put up, so that it doesn't have to be someone from the 6. But I feel like if we go back to what we were just discussing, who do you want to sit next to in the end, and who do you think you could potentially beat? If they think that she is a problem per se, you know, then maybe that's something they're also considering, is that if they feel like they've got the ability to kind of control her, and if she makes it further in the game, she's not necessarily going to be able to get to the final 3 or the final 2 because she doesn't have all of those other final 3 alliances like some of the other people in the house have created. So it might be to their benefit to keep her there longer, but then again, it might not.
I think ultimately it's going to come down to who wins the competition, because I think that group is pretty well divided. I do think that David is more likely right because her side seems to be smaller. Her side seems to be her, Nicole, I would say Kevin probably, and the other side would be like what, Tyler, Cody, Enzo, Christmas, and then maybe David, and David's with them too, probably against Danny and Nicole. So I think, I guess, so how many are left now? What, like 9 or 8?
Too many. Yeah.
So, I feel like it's more than that. I feel like it's 11.
It might only be 3 people on the side of, Danny. So for that reason, I would say, yeah, she's in trouble. But I think she has been near the bottom of that group for a while, and at least picking up Devon and Kevin is a good move, because the alternative is she doesn't pick them up and remains at the bottom.
Yeah. Of course, the problem is by picking up Devon, she becomes seen as more of a problem.
But what is it?
But
This is something that comes up a lot in Big Brother. Like the whole thing about Devon made a mistake by that like Danny was talking about. Devon made a mistake by using the veto on Kevin because now now you're on the block with Kevin, and it's because you made that move. No, it's not. Devon and Kevin were going on the block anyway. They were already on the, but Devon was already on the bottom. So I never, you know. And so I respect Devon for trying to keep as many numbers as she can. Yeah, most likely she's still going to lose because Kevin is, you know, not winning a bunch of competitions and there's only a couple of them. So the odds are stacked against them, but at least it's another person that has a chance to win, and that's and that she knows is on her side. Even if Devon did everything that Danny and everybody else wanted her to do, she would still have been on the bottom of that group and would still have been nominated. So, so you have to take these chances while you still can, when there's still people in the game that have your back. And again, this goes back to like Winners at War, where I think some people made a mistake by sort of letting people go home, and then they had no numbers left to do anything about Tony and Sarah. You know, and so the opportunity goes back to the beginning. And this is where, like, I think Devon made a mistake near the beginning of the game when there was an opportunity to team up maybe with like Kaser and Janelle. And you know, and I think Bailey and Devon thought that they were more in the majority than they were, and let the people go home that eventually they would have needed in order to survive past now.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So Adam, you've already started going into the rules. You've actually made it into rule 1 here. So let's go ahead. As I mentioned earlier, Devon has been a fan of Big Brother for a long time, but she came into this season knowing she would have to make some changes from her prior games. What did she change? Why wasn't it enough? And where did she go very, very wrong? It's time to figure out why Devon lost. And, you know, Adam, you've already started a little bit in what I was going to say about rule 1, which is, of course, to scheme and plot. Now, she understood this, and she understood plotting went on in the house, and she did try to gather some allies early, such as Bailey and Kevin, supposedly both Nicole's, and of course, that very, very powerful alliance, the Slick Six. Unfortunately, she wasn't that great at figuring out who was actually on her side or doing what plotting, as exemplified by the fact that the Slick Six was a fake alliance that was created in large part to control her and Bailey.
Which it did very well.
Yes.
Yes, it did.
Now, so this goes next to what you were just saying, Adam. You know, we've talked about this before. She let her true allies go while sticking to the quote unquote allies who were definitely not on her side. As person after person left, true ally after true ally, she kept waiting to really play the game. We talked about this before. After Christmas's HOH win, Devon said, now we're playing Big Brother. And then even more recently, as she was talking to herself before using the veto last week, she said, I guess it's time to play Big Brother. But it was time to play the game weeks and weeks ago. And
Week 1.
Yeah. Right. Other people have been doing so, getting rid of the very people who might have worked with her, like you said. And yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. When she was ready to start playing, she had nobody to play with.
No allies left.
Yeah.
I mean, she saved one, Kevin, and I think that was a good move. But by that point, like I said, the odds were so stacked against them to win the next HOH.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do think that she would have been better off doing what the Slick Six was ultimately doing. Was they had a second kind of backup alliance just to make sure that they were keeping people in check. She could have certainly tried to do that with Kaser and Janelle and really tried to utilize them in a different way than she did. I mean, they really seemed to be disinterested in working with them instead of saying, okay, yep, no, we'll work with them too. Like the Slick Six was a fake alliance, she could have done something very similar, because I think then there's more information being shared. You have the ability to compare notes more easily because more people are talking to you. And instead it seemed to be an unwillingness to really go down that path with Janelle because there was concerns about Janelle. And I think that was really limiting to her game.
I think we also have to look not just at Devon's decisions, but also the gameplay of both the people who were on their way out the door early on and the people that have been in control, and criticize the people who were on their way out for not more convincingly, for either not recognizing the true power structure, or for not being able to convince the people that were actually at the bottom that they were actually at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It's on them as well to be convincing in that. And you have to credit the people who were convincing Devon and Bailey and whoever else that wasn't in the majority at the time, whether it's Ian or Kevin or whoever, that you have to credit them for doing a good job of making these people feel like they were in the majority.
Right.
And there's no reason for them to go with Kaser and Janelle and these other people that are on their way out the door, because I'm in a power position and there's no reason to do anything about it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what a discussion that really exemplified it was when Kaser was on his way out and he had that conversation with Bailey, and he said, he said he was talking to her and she got mad at him and said, "You don't know the game that I'm playing." And the problem was, and I said this on Twitter, she didn't know the game she was being played by. And so she thought she had the Slick Six Alliance, and that's why she was okay letting Kaser go and letting those other people go, because she was part of the controlling alliance. The problem was she wasn't, and she just didn't recognize that, and Devon didn't recognize that at the time. So I mean, that whole fake alliance really did work.
It worked exceptionally well against the people like Bailey and Devon, for sure. Yeah, I mean, Adam's right. They did a great job in kind of bamboozling them, if you will, like making them feel like we are in control and you're part of this group, and really just setting them up to fall much sooner than they had anticipated.
Yeah. Now, the other problem, which I alluded to, was that she just had so many bad reads on people and situations. She has believed for much of the game that David was out to get her, and that simply hasn't been true. It reminds me of how Nicole A. was treating Janelle and Kaser. I'm not saying that David is a great player or even a good player, and he has certainly acted in strange enough ways to make anyone raise an eyebrow at him. Just the way he answers questions is terrible. But Devon convinced herself that he was trying to ruin her game. A few weeks ago, she was saying she didn't like him, wouldn't work with him. And it was Puya on the live feed recap noted at the time she was playing like she had a lot more options than she actually did. And now fast forward to her being out of the game, and Mike Bloom asked her why she believed that David was the one who flipped. And Devon responded that the relationship between herself and David was rocky from the jump, and again brought up the incorrect statement about him supposedly going out of his way to sabotage her game throughout the season. She said, quote, "It was so easy for me to wash my hands of it. His track record was terrible." And so she was still basically blaming David for her misread.
Yeah, it's very interesting to watch the conversations. Obviously, we get to see the conversations that are being had between these two people over here, and then we get to see the follow-up conversation that these two people are having over here. So we get the big picture, if you will, and they're of course missing certain components and certain pieces. But I thought it was fascinating that people did seem so willing to write some information off. But what I will give her credit for is that Devon seemed to have a willingness to go to the people that she has heard things about and confront them and talk to them about it, which then upset the people that she had spoken to, because then it got back to them. The information was being shared. So kudos to her for trying to sort through all of the information that she was being fed. Well, but listen, I find it incredibly fascinating that the people who are being told, Devon told me this, but don't tell anybody that I'm telling you, are upset when they're doing exactly what Devon did that upset them. You know, it's like, you really can't be upset with her because you're now doing the same thing. I think that she tried. I do think that she tried to sort through the information because she was trying to go to those people. It might not have been the best approach because clearly other people were then talking about it as well, but at least she tried.
I do think that like the all of the blame cannot be put on Devon for the bad reads. And this goes back to what I was just saying. The last thing I was saying before was you have to look at the good gameplay and the bad gameplay from other people. And I think Nicole and Danny played her incredibly well in terms of lying about that vote, if we're just talking about that instance. And David gave her every reason in the world. And you kind of said he didn't do this, but he really did give her every reason in the world to doubt him because, and this is a huge thing that I say about Survivor, Big Brother, any of these games, don't lie unnecessarily. It's the dumbest thing you can do. It blew my mind when he played that disruptor power and he lied to everyone. What's the point? What do you gain by having people not know that you did? And I respected the tears. I was like, wow, he actually like did that pretty well, but it doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't matter. So you get away with it. Even if he got away with it, what does it do? How does it help you? It doesn't. Yeah. So this is like such a big thing that is so easy to do in these games. Don't tell unnecessary lies.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to have trustworthiness in order for people to believe you when you're telling the truth and believe you when you need to tell a necessary lie. Truth has power. Right. Truth is the more truth you can reveal early on, the more you set yourself up for success in the future. So I don't blame Devon for not trusting him at all because he showed himself to be willing to lie about the dumb things. Right. So if he's willing to lie about the dumb things, you got to think that he might be willing to lie about the important things as well. And right. So, that is just like, I feel for Devon in that instance because like if the person that you're dealing with isn't acting rationally, sometimes you might make bad reads about what it is that they're doing. Like I'll give a personal anecdote from Winners at War. I had a very strong and very incorrect read that Sarah had the idol at the Yara camp. And that read was in large part based on the fact that Ben, who is one of the best idol finders ever, was actively searching, what I thought was pretending to search for an idol at the camp, when to me it was very clear for a number of reasons that there was no idol anywhere at that camp anymore. It had already been found. And I figured Ben of all people knows how that works, that if the cameras don't follow you out of camp, there's nothing there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I knew that Sophie wouldn't share an idol with Ben. So the only thing that was rational to me at that point was that Sarah found the idol and shared it with Ben. Or Ben found and shared it with Sarah, but I had other reasons. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I was totally wrong and totally sure of myself because in my mind, I would never search for an idol that I knew wasn't there. And so I figured that Ben wouldn't either. And it distorted my view of what was truth. And so when someone behaves in a way that you wouldn't behave or that isn't like rational to your mind, it can change the way that you view reality, and it can give you real certainty about reads that are totally wrong.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. Go
ahead.
I do think that part of her reads too. I mean, this is something that we saw happen with the Christmas and Bailey blow up. It was personal versus game. And I think there's been a distinction that's being made by certain people playing the game. And Devon is one of those people. And when she went to Nicole trusting Nicole in a personal way. It wasn't based on game. It was, I'm coming to you, I'm looking for your truth, and I'm asking you because I want to know the truth, because I need to for myself, and I need to be able to react to this situation appropriately. And so I think it became a little more personal. And so when Nicole said, yeah, no, I voted the way that I told you I was going to vote, it carried more weight for her because it was more of a personal answer as opposed to a game answer. And I think
that though, because it was personal for Devon, but it very much would have affected Nicole's game if she had told the truth.
Oh, for sure.
So you can't make it like you can't say it's personal. So I want you to tell me the truth personally when there are game implications that would hurt the person for telling the truth. So I have a hard time with someone unilaterally deciding that a conversation is personal.
Right. And I don't necessarily agree with that approach. I'm just saying that that's what I think Devon was doing as part of those potential misreads, was that she was making it personal as opposed to just being game.
Well,
but that was on Devon for making it personal when Nicole never really agreed to have a personal conversation and was sort of cornered into that. So, that's a tough situation.
Yeah. The other thing is Devon clearly went into that already believing David was lying, because as we're watching Nicole, she was not a convincing liar in that scene. In that situation, she wasn't meeting her eyes. She wasn't.
Overall, I thought she did a pretty good job.
I just mean in that final situation where Devon was like, personally, you have to tell me. And Nicole's like, not, I don't know. It wasn't convincing to me. But I mean, there were other times, and I know, Adam, I agree with you about, what David did. And it's just that there were so many situations where she just assigned things that were not true. And it happened again this week. She was convinced that she was Memphis's target all along.
Right.
When in fact, Memphis really did want to backdoor David. But everything that happened, she took as confirmation that she was right. And she even told Mike Bloom in the post-game interview, I know this week was very much planned. Talking about Tyler.
Gave Memphis way too much credit throughout the week, thinking that he was this like mastermind that was like lying to her on that was for sure a bad read.
Yeah, and she's like, how could Tyler have just done it so quickly? So she's assuming that there was this big plan when really Tyler went against Memphis's plan.
Right.
And she sees these things and assumes they're all together. And earlier in the season, there were several live feed recap and roundtable discussions about how Devon loves puzzles and was always looking to solve something. And I think she just saw a puzzle everywhere, even when it wasn't there.
Yeah, like another good example is the Tyler situation where I think he really did have her and Bailey's back over Danny and was throwing Danny under the bus and telling them the truth that Danny was coming after them. But Tyler all season long keeps getting blown up by people who he's trying to actually help, who then reveal that he's the source of that information, which turns him against them, kind of rightfully so,
Yeah.
And the only reason Devon ended up so close with Danny and Nicole was because Danny was against her, but then by going against Tyler, she got Danny off her back. So it kind of worked in a weird way, but she ended up with the person that really didn't have her back initially and ended up against somebody who really did have her back initially and sort of flipped it in that way because of an incorrect read. But ultimately, I don't know that it mattered that much. Because she just swapped one person for another. Although I do think that Tyler is a better ally to have on your side because he is so good at the game and convincing people to move in his direction, that I do think it is, it's good to have him on your side. And she did until she revealed that information, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I've spent a lot of this rule criticizing Devon. I don't want to make it sound like she didn't do anything good in regard to this rule, because she did. We look back a couple weeks when she was up against Bailey. Devon went to work even before the veto competition to quietly get people on her side. Now, this was smart, because up until this point in the season, we kept seeing people wait. Like, I don't want to do anything until the veto. I don't want to do anything until this. But she wanted to make sure she stuck around even when she was up against her friend in the house.
Yeah, and that's got to be hard, because she dealt with that same situation twice. She had Bailey, and then she had Kevin. And so I think it did put her in a more difficult position this week, because she had already dealt with that. And I think it has to take a lot out of to be going up against your friend and having to advocate against them while advocating for yourself. So it had to have been hard for her, and she acknowledged that she had already been through that once with Bailey. And so I think that what she said at the veto, whether or not Tyler should use the veto, and she just kind of threw her hands up in the air, I think that might have come from that she was just kind of excited at that point, like, I've already been through this, I've already done it, what's going to be is going to be. And so I think she found herself in a very uncomfortable position back to back. And I think that probably affected her ability to really like she did previously.
Yeah. Now, to finish up this rule, I do want to remind all of us that as we, much as we discussed for Bailey, none of the people of color in this season were invited into the core alliance, just the fake one. Also, as we discussed then, by having a large alliance like that, even if you make a mistake, you have people to back you up. I mean, how many times have we seen Danny and Christmas and Memphis screw up? But there are people there who have their backs. And when Devon screwed up, there was nobody there to help her correct the mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we can move into the second rule, which tells players not to scheme and plot too much and to keep their scheming secret. As we noted when we discussed why Bailey lost, Devon had some problems here, mainly in something that actually you've both, I think both of you have already brought this up. Jessica, you certainly brought it up in a positive way, but she often spread information every time she had a piece of news, including sometimes going to the people that the news was about. So she wasn't exactly keeping her scheming secret. So Melissa Denny noted in the week leading up to Bailey's eviction, they always reveal everything. And it eliminated the value of some of the information that they had.
Totally.
Yeah. But the thing that I find so fascinating, I'll go back to this again, is that everyone is doing it. I mean, everyone in this house is very, very bad at keeping secrets, and they all get very frustrated and angry when they sit down and have a conversation and find out that so-and-so said something about them, but they're doing the same thing. So to me, I find it so incredibly it's a whole lot of gossip mongering going on. And one of the first things you often hear someone say is, well, who'd you hear that from? Who told you that? Because they want to know, obviously. And I think that's a telltale sign that was actually said, because they want to know who's throwing them under the bus. But I do give her credit for trying to get the information, because it seems like that's what everyone is doing. Everyone is running around in circles trying to find out who's talking about who and who said what about who. So even though it worked against her, I think it really worked against her because she didn't have that backing. It's not like someone like Christmas, who's got 5 other people behind her, or Memphis, who has 5 people behind him. When you're sharing information, it's more like, oh, good, we're building up everything we need to know so we can move forward with power and control in the house. She's playing catch up, and unfortunately, because she's playing catch up, it ends up putting her in a bad light instead of a powerful position where she has more information.
Yeah. Now, I do think another problem was that sometimes Devon would do other things to spark distrust among people who might have been her allies or were supposedly her allies. For example, she put out a story about Tyler as some sort of test. But then when the story got around, it obviously didn't make Tyler very happy because it was really a lie. Then other times she would investigate everything again, like it's a puzzle, which could also make her allies feel like she didn't trust them. Going back a few weeks, even more than that, she was going around asking everyone competing in the safety suite competition to have her as their +1, which made her look sketchy to her slick six, quote unquote, allies, because if she really believed in them, she shouldn't have needed safety. And, while it's true that every time I have said allies here, I mean people pretending to be on her side, the fact is that some of the things she did helped ensure that it would forever remain a fake alliance because the others felt she was paranoid. Now, on the flip side, I could point out that you're not paranoid if they really are out to get you.
Yeah, that's true. That's a fair point.
I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up. And I think about like Memphis or Christmas or somebody like that, who easily, I think, could have also been in a fake alliance. You know what I mean? Like they weren't really at the core of the Cody and Tyler and Enzo and Nicole. Like those people seem to be really more central. And Memphis and Christmas, I think, have survived because they have never doubted their alliance.
Right.
And so they've never given anyone a reason to kind of turn on them or make that alliance a fake alliance. But I do think that some of that comes from like some like racial biases, like it's I think there's this expectation that almost that the white people are gonna like team up together. And so I think it's natural and warranted for somebody like Devon to not be super trusting of all of that, because as she said in like her exit speech, she recognizes that this has happened over and over and over again, where the minorities in the House, or specifically the Black people in the House, are on the outside. And so I think Memphis and like Christmas almost like deluded themselves into safety because they didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. But it's self-fulfilling, unfortunately, in that if you believe that is likely to happen to you, then you create the environment in which that will happen to you.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. Absolutely. And I do think too that Memphis and Christmas have, in addition to finding themselves in that group of 6, because that was the group that kind of came together for those particular reasons, I think they've been the 2 that have been the least expected when everyone walks out the door. And when they're finding out who that group of 6 is inclusive of, it's Memphis and Christmas, and nobody saw them coming. They're always really...
Because I don't think they really were included. I think their alliance was also fake, just as fake as the alliance with Bailey and Devon. If you go back to those early weeks, I don't think anyone was really like, Memphis, that's the guy that I'm going to go to the final 6 with. Right? I mean, when you think back to them, they were like, well, he's we'll keep him around for now. Just tell him what he wants to hear, but he's not going to be around too long. And I think if you would have asked the audience at the time, is Memphis going to stick around? They would have said no. They would have said no. But I think the reason he's still there is because he's never doubted that he's in the in group.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah. And he's also utilizing...
If you're in the in-group, you kind of are.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if you walk the walk and talk the talk. Yeah.
Christmas is so loyal to that slick 6. And in some ways, I think she has made it stick together because if you're in that group, Christmas is not coming after you. You know it.
The committee, not the slick 6. Yes.
The committee, right. You know if you're in and I think that's why the committee stuck together. It's not that the committee was the real alliance. There was no real alliance. There was no real alliance, no real big alliance, I should say. The only reason that one's still there is it's like anything else in this world. Why do we spend cash? It's not real. It's only real because everybody believes that it's real. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah. So,
And you've got someone like Memphis who keeps becoming head of household. He had the power very early on. He's got the power again. And so it was one of those situations where that just added to that idea because he believed he was part of this six. And then now he's got the power and everyone's coming and talking to him. And it's just feeding that belief even more and adding to his idea that I'm part of this group and I'm not going to nominate any of them. So I have to look elsewhere. And it really does kind of, it's like a narrative that just kind of takes on its own story as it moves forward because it seems to be working and everybody seems to have this belief that it's a thing. And so they all kind of stick to it. Whether or not it will be to their detriment later, it's working for them right now. It's keeping them in power. It's keeping them in the game.
I remember a conversation with Kaser and Memphis where Kaser was saying, like, you're at the bottom and thinking, wow, Memphis is such a fool because he is at the bottom of that group. Kaser is right. But now he's still there and he's still with that group and he wasn't really at the bottom because he believed so strongly that he wasn't.
And now he's added even more components and more levels or layers, if you will, to that group by creating these sub alliances. So he is really looking at it as a big puzzle and I'm part of the big piece and then I'm going to start building off of it. So you have to give him credit for doing that. And I do think that you're absolutely correct. And if you believe it, it will happen. It's like that.
And I just want to be clear that I think that that's a disadvantage for people of color because they have more reason to not trust that they are being taken care of.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, to something else that you mentioned way at the beginning, Adam, was that, Devon's fellow house guests had supposed reasons that would, if they were true, fall into this rule. I call them excuses, much the way you did. Because like Cody and Danny said, it was because she used her veto on Kevin the prior week, which showed that she didn't trust them. But, you said, and, it's an excuse. She was already on the out. She was already on the bottom. So they would have come out with some different rationalization. It's like, Cody, I think at one point said, well, now I'm 100% going to nominate her and we want to get rid of her. Oh, what was it?
It was 99 point. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, and then another excuse was that Tyler said he wanted to split up the quote unquote power duo of Devon and Kevin. And while this rule certainly says don't form an obvious duo, calling these two a power duo stretches the term really far. They were two players who were alone other than each other with two comp wins between them. In the Zingbot veto competition, Kevin and Devon had the two worst times. It is ridiculous to call them a power duo as a reason, an excuse to vote them out.
I think excuse is the exact right word. Absolutely. Yeah. They were not a power duo at all. And even if they were working together, what are they going to do? There's just two. I mean, it's not like they've got all of these people behind them. It's not like they can really rally the troops because there's no troops left to rally. So at that point, it's really not doing anything other than we're going to put up two people who are not part of our group. That's ultimately what it boils down to.
I agree 100%, but I'll also say that doesn't necessarily make it a bad move to nominate them because certainly they wouldn't have been on Memphis's side. They were on the side of like Danny and Nicole. I just think that the reasons that were given were complete nonsense.
Right.
It's just a matter of who is with me and who's not with me, and whether she saved Kevin or not, she was always going to be a target for somebody like Memphis.
Yeah. And it's, that's exactly it. Because if we're going to talk about duos, the more important one is that Devon was seen as part of, the Danny Nicole trio, duo, whatever you want to call it, mostly Danny. Several people in the committee worried about that. And it was confirmed for them when Devon and Kevin both got house guest choice and both picked those two. And then the more Danny campaigned to keep Devon, the more it convinced the other people in the committee that it was because she wanted Devon for her own purposes. I mean, in a rational world,
maybe they should have put up Nicole and Danny.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. In a rational world, if you're worried about Danny, vote out Danny. But rational is not the word I would use here.
However, I think that Nicole and Danny are, in the current situation of the house, far more influential than Devon and Kevin were. And so it's a safer play to go after David or Devon or Kevin, because their ability to influence the rest of the group is negligible compared to the hold that Danny and Nicole, like Nicole might have some real sway with, say, Tyler or somebody like that. You know what I mean? There's way more connections that you have to worry about. And so it's a far riskier play. And then you would still have, you're going to have three, like, let's say you're worried about Nicole, Danny, Devon, and Kevin as a group. If you can safely get rid of one of those without causing blowback, maybe it is the best play. If you go after the two that have the most influence and you leave the other ones in, and they're able to scoop somebody else up, now all of a sudden it's a real scary situation. If they can bring one or two people over, now you're in the minority.
Right. Yeah. It's a terrible numbers game for sure.
So I don't necessarily think it's a bad play. Right. If someone has a lot of influence and you're not 100% sure that you can take them out, you have to be really careful about how you go after them. And one of the safer ways to do that is to reduce the influence that they have in the house, which is accomplished by taking out Devon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what and that's what I meant when I said that's more important of a duo than the duo they were making excuses about.
Right, but it's like the Cold War, and sometimes when you go straight at the Soviet Union, they might have a nuke that they can throw right back.
Right.
Devon and Kevin have no nukes.
No.
That is true. Yeah, they're going to cause the least
Sometimes
amount of
you invade Nicaragua, and it's terrible, and it's disgusting, the things that you do when you invade Nicaragua, and you prop up dictators that are murderous, but you get away with it because you're the United States, and you're the superpower, and that's how it goes.
That's the committee right there.
That's the committee.
One hell of an analogy.
Yes, I was an international relations major, so it's now used it for the first time since I graduated college.
All right,
excellent,
good job.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can move to the third rule, which talks about the need to be flexible, and I do think Devon tried to make this happen for the most part. In her pregame interview with ET Online, she said one of her goals was to play, beat by beat, so she would be ready for the twists, which is indeed part of this rule. We also saw her willing to make deals with people who had previously wronged her, though in some of those cases she clearly shouldn't have. But at least she wasn't.
Believe that those people had wronged her.
Right. But at least she wasn't cutting herself off, except, of course, for David. He was one situation where she was definitely not flexible because she had it set in her mind, as we've discussed, that he was out to get her.
Yeah. And I do think that she was probably in a tough spot when it came to being flexible because of the numbers that are happening in the house. I mean, when you have so many things just working against you, it does limit your ability to become flexible, even though I think she was trying to maneuver and see what else was out there. But when there's a group of 6 that are running the show, it really limits what you can and cannot do in the game. And so for all of the attempts that she was making to try to figure out what was happening and determine who was the best person to work with, unfortunately, a lot of that information was then going right back to that six, because she was sharing with people who were part of the six, thinking that she was working with them. So it really, I think, was a spiral that she found herself in that was a difficult thing for her to get out of.
I think the successful outcomes here in terms of flexibility are either no flexibility at all, which is kind of like the Memphis and the Christmas strategy, and just insulate and integrate, which I think honestly, I think she could have done. Her and Bailey may have been able to do that if they were blind and thought that this group was 100% solid and didn't do little things like, hey, can you use the +1 on me and things like that, right? So I think that could have worked. I really do. But I understand why she wouldn't go all in like that, because it is based in a little bit of delusion. The other option is a ton of flexibility, where you go completely with the other side, which goes back to the beginning and what we were talking about before with like Kaser and Janelle and, you know, Nicole, whatever, the people that were early elimination. I think that what didn't work was, let me consider my options and put feelers out, but then still stay with this group, because all you're doing is you're getting rid of the people that could have your back, but also by considering different things or distrusting what you're being told or whatever, you're giving the people that you are working with reason to put you lower on the totem pole in that group. So I think doing a little bit here is not the right call.
I like that assessment. That's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, the fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them. Jessica, how do you think Devon did here?
I think this is the same type of issue that we've been discussing about Devon. She came into this game with kind of the world on her shoulders, if you will. And I don't blame her for feeling that way, because she was representing something greater than just herself. She wanted to represent a certain group of people and wanted to represent that group in a way that people would respect and understand. And she was also trying to educate people while doing that. You know, she wanted to educate people in the house. She wanted to utilize this as a platform, if you will. And so I don't necessarily think it was an emotional thing that she was struggling with, but there is certainly emotions tied to that. And she wasn't able to focus solely on wanting to play a game, because she just couldn't, because of the circumstances and the world that we currently find ourselves living in. I think really put her in a detriment here. And it was a struggle that we saw her living through on the television. And it was something that she was very vocal about, but also very proud. And so there's this whole swarm of things that we got to see from her that I think was an incredible experience to watch. And I really have so much respect for her for sharing it with the world and trying to utilize the platform that she had in the manner in which she did it.
And it's a burden that the white people in the house don't have. It's an additional advantage for them that other people come in with this disadvantage of not solely being able to focus on the gameplay. And so I think that can lend, you know, it's not just that this big group is a bunch of white people that are racist. It's that they have more advantages in the game than somebody who's coming in with more reasons for being there. And I think this is important, making those reasons public.
Yes.
Because she vocalized out loud to people that were not Black, that she wasn't like, what was the conversation with, I think it was with Nicole, right? Early on when it was Nicole against David, was that the setup? And she basically said to Nicole, I can't vote to keep you here because I want to protect the Black people in the house. And so this is like the untouchable thing that we had with Christmas, where you're revealing your cards strategically, even though for you it's not strategic. It's very deeply personal, but everyone else is just playing a game.
Yes.
They're not worried about what you're worried about. They're not thinking about what you're thinking about. And so when you say out loud that you're unwilling to vote out another minority or another Black person in the house, you sort of put a bigger target on their backs. Why, as a game player, if I'm just trying to win and I'm not concerned about what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement or whatever it might be, when does the doorbell ever ring?
During a podcast, it does, apparently.
During a pandemic, who do we know? We don't know anybody. Why would the doorbell ring?
Oh, now it's proof you're not social distancing. You're having people over.
No, we're not. We don't know anybody.
The truth comes out. Oh my goodness!
I have no idea. When does the doorbell ring during a pandemic?
Yeah,
I've never
maybe.
Should you go and check and make sure everything's okay?
Haley got it under control.
Yeah,
she's doing great.
Oh my goodness!
I don't really know exactly where I was at, but bottom line, I think you sort of unintentionally put more of a target on maybe your own back and the backs of the other minorities in the house when you explicitly say, I'm unwilling to vote them out over you. So if I'm the you, okay, well then one of you has to go. I get that as a game player.
Yeah, and that goes back to something that we frequently talk about on Survivor, and we've also talked about it here on previous podcasts, is when it comes to the rules are designed for, this is someone who the goal is to win. The goal is not to go out there and save the chickens or to, preach your religion or whatever else. The goal is to win. The thing is, in the past, we haven't had someone like a Devon who is necessarily here for another very important reason. And I'm sorry, I don't think saving the chickens is quite as important a reason. So typically when someone would have that, we would get to this rule and we would say they were not playing to win. They were playing for other reasons. They let their emotions get away with that. I'm hesitant to criticize her for that because I mean, from a gameplay point, from a pure strategic gameplay point, yes, it was a mistake. But am I going to tell her it was a mistake in this case? No, I can't do that.
Right.
And so, I mean, I do think she tried to control her emotions. She told Mike Bloom regarding the week 5 and what she was thinking at the time. She said, even though this stuff is going on, you still have to play. Don't let your emotions consume your gameplay. That's what my downfall was in the past, for my emotions to take over. And so I do think that she knew and she was trying to control them as much as she could, but I also think her intent was a little bit better than her actual play in other cases where her emotions did run away with her. Earlier we talked about her puzzling things out, but often instead of thinking through something logically, she seemed to make assumptions and jump to incorrect conclusions to solve those puzzles. And again, I go back to David, and I know, Adam, you raised some good points about David, but she just got it into her head that he was going after her. He was gunning for her. He was trying to ruin her game, and nothing could change her mind about that. And there is one other thing that I do have to bring up, and that is on the feeds. She said she didn't trust David in part because he's a secular humanist. And she has obviously made her religious beliefs obvious to the point of getting Julie Chen to add in a hallelujah there, in the Thursday episode. Now, maybe, and even probably, it's a situation where she already didn't trust him and she was rationalizing why. But no matter what, doing something like that is purely emotional and does go against good strategy. She had slim pickings for allies, and she rejected one who was willing to work with her. You've raised the problems already, but for her to even bring that up, to me, that's an emotional situation.
Yeah, no, and I think that it's interesting because her goal, I think, was to win, but it was to win for something larger than herself. She wanted to be a a representation. And as we heard in her speech before she was evicted from the house, that incredible speech that she gave, she wanted to be that representation for everyone else that would then be walking through these doors. And I think that that brings with it a lot of weight, and it brings with it an inability to really sort things out evenly in your mind necessarily when you're trying to determine who you should believe and who you shouldn't believe and what's personal and what's game. And I think that we saw that mix all together for her, and it unfortunately did not work out the way that she hoped it would.
Yeah. Now, the fifth rule tells players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Adam, how do you think Devon did here?
Good, I think. I don't watch the feed, so it's harder. But I mean, Devon seems awesome, and like she would be a great person to like be friends with and hang out with. Seems like a lot of fun. You know, I think maybe the knock is like the not trusting people more, like not trusting Tyler, for example, and sitting on some of the information that he was like delivering. And I think just, you know, keeping more stuff to yourself. But it seems like people really liked her in the house, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 And she had the building blocks to be able to make really strong, trusting relationships. But I think the people that did have her back, she wasn't able to capitalize on those relationships and ended up with people that didn't really, at least initially, have her back.
Yeah. In her pregame interview with ET Online, she said goal number one was to shut up. And after the game, she told Dalton Ross that in her first 2 seasons, she was very unapologetically herself. But then so many people afterwards said she was too harsh, talked too much, and was too direct. So she told herself if she ever went back to play, she was again just going to shut up. And I do think this was a toned down version of Devon. And I applaud her intent of making a change to benefit herself in the game. You see what can be improved and you do that. But I also think she's the type of person who can never take that fully out of herself, or she isn't herself anymore.
Right. Yeah, she clearly has a strong personality, and she is someone that I definitely got the impression that when someone connected with her, they really connected with her. People that I think that have walked away or will be walking away from this game for the opportunity to play with her, and that they would be friends moving forward. And I believe that that is going to be the case because there's clearly a connection there. So she does, as Adam said, she's got all the tools in the toolbox for it. And I think that she had the capabilities of really utilizing this to her benefit, but perhaps it also worked to her detriment because she was someone who could rally people if she really needed to, because she has that strong personality. It does put her in a position where toning it down might be better for her because there's that concern. You have a strong personality. People might glom onto you and they might get behind you, and then you can start building a force. And she just wasn't able to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Well, the sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. And earlier in the season, one reason Devon was kept around in favor of voting out others was that she was thought of as unable to win competitions. She realized this, and even though she had worked on her stamina in the time leading up to her return to the game, she purposely threw the wall comp and fake cried so she could maintain that image, which helped to reduce her threat level. Now, even so, somehow a group consisting of almost everybody in the house determined that Devon, who had one person as an ally, was a threat that had to be dealt with right now.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to her just being on the wrong side of the numbers. I mean, Adam went through this with, who's going to be the safer of the two to put up, and do you really want to run the risk of putting the two up that are potentially going to cause ripples in this group that you've created, or do you want to just go with the easy two individuals that don't really have anyone in their corner, and what kind of ripple will they really create if they stick around or if they don't? And I think that that's ultimately where she found herself. But I think it was easier for them to say, well, she was a threat to their game for X, Y, and Z, because again, we talked about excuses already. It gave them something to focus on and something to point to and say, well, this is why she needs to go home.
Yeah. Yeah. So, moving to the seventh rule, it says to trust almost nobody. And last week, I said the biggest issue we had was how Ian had so much trust in Nicole and Danny, his supposed allies and friends, which makes this week a repeat. To the point that Devon and Kevin, as we discussed, picked those two as house guest choices in the veto. Devon was completely misted. She told Dalton Ross, I was under the impression that Nicole and I were working together in the game. She was supposed to be my ally. And it seems like Devon trusted Nicole based on what Nicole said at the beginning of the season regarding how thankful she was for the vote that gave her $500,000. But the fact is, Nicole was never thankful enough to actually be a trustworthy ally. And Danny has shown she isn't really trustworthy for anyone. But those were the people she trusted more than someone like David.
Well, and I think that the whole relationship with Nicole is probably based in part on the fact that she knows Nicole from their previous season together. And there has to be something that comes with that. If they're with one that you play for, you have a better understanding of how they're going to play the game, what they're going to do, because you've already interacted with them. And I think that there's a little bit of a safety that comes with playing the game with someone you've played the game with before because of that familiarity. And so perhaps that was one of the reasons why she glommed on to Nicole, because she had that knowledge base. With a lot of these other individuals like David, she even acknowledged that she didn't even really know how he was going to play the game because he didn't even really play the game the first time he was on. And so she was very cognizant of those types of things in making the determinations. And I think that was probably why she put more stock in someone like Nicole as opposed to someone like David, because she had no familiarity with him.
I do think that her trusting Nicole and Danny made Nicole and Danny better allies for her than they would have been if she didn't. Like, you determine who is most loyal to you by who you trust, more so than the other way around. You don't trust the people that are loyal to you. You make them loyal to you by trusting them and being very open in that trust. The more information you tell them, like, hey, Tyler is telling me that you're coming after you. I don't believe it. And now Danny's like, well, I was, but now I'm not going to, because clearly you trust me so much. So you create your own allies by who you decide to tell information and who you openly trust. I think one of the problems is that she chose to trust people that didn't want control, explicit, direct control. Tyler is someone that has been winning competitions and wanting to win competitions. And that, to me, is a better ally than somebody who's actively trying to throw head of household competitions. Your allies don't mean anything if they're not willing to win.
Yeah.
Right? So if I had the choice of choosing, look, even if I know somebody has been coming after me, if I can make them feel like I have no idea about that and that I trust them explicitly, and I tell them information that I shouldn't tell them, which is basically what she did with Danny and Nicole, you can get that person on your side. And get them off your back, kind of. Now, if you can do that with more people, that's better.
Right.
If you can get, and this is what like someone like Tyler, who I think is one of the best to ever play the game, is really good at doing, is making people feel like he trusts them a lot. That's why he gives them information. That's why, and he's willing to win for you. Willing to win and put other people up. And so if I'm ever playing Big Brother, I want to align with people that are willing to win, that want to take control. Even somebody like a Memphis, like Memphis doesn't care. Like, so great. I want Memphis to know that I am super duper loyal to Memphis. And I think that's why Memphis is still in the game.
Yeah, and it makes sense in a game like Big Brother, where winning the comps is the person who becomes head of household, who makes the decisions about who's going to go on the block. So it's definitely to your benefit to have a strong relationship with them, because they're not going to nominate you. And you're also going to know what their nominations are going to be and what their mindset is going into the nominations. So it's certainly to your benefit to have someone on your side that is winning those comps.
And that's why Danny is not a great ally in this game. And everyone says she's untrustworthy. It's not just that she's untrustworthy. It's that she's unwilling to win because she has so many irons in the fire. She does not want to have to betray anybody.
Right. Yeah. The only time she wins HOH, it was because she couldn't fall fast enough. That she, I wanted to throw it, but then suddenly everybody else was down. It's like, because all you had to do was let go. But yeah, I mean, I think that Devon did earn their trust, but not really. In other words, yes, she was a good side piece, but she was never going to supplant the committee. And they just had her
numbers. I think Danny and Nicole, if they had gotten control, I don't think they would have put up Devon.
Oh, I don't think they would have.
They didn't want control, is my point.
Right.
They didn't want control, and they wouldn't go against the committee. And so
they didn't have the numbers to go against the committee. Even if I do think they wanted to keep Devon over Kevin, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
Right.
But I still think that everything they did was still just misting Devon. I mean, just look at Nicole. She kept lying and lying and lying.
But that wasn't against Devon. Really, it was against David. It made him, right? Like, they were actively against David. Now, the unintended consequence of that was it made the other side of their alliance want to keep David even more.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't work. Right. But I don't think that it was against Devon. I don't think that Nicole and Danny ultimately were like disloyal to Devon. They just weren't telling her the truth.
Yeah, I think it kind of worked to their detriment. I think they wanted to keep her loyal to them. And so this lie, I think, became larger than the idea of it, where all of a sudden, all of these, she even said, and Danny said in I don't know, the room that they talk in, I forgot what it's called. But that it it was the diary room. Thank you. That it was working so much better than she had even anticipated. Like, she didn't expect it to blow up the way that it did when there was the whole fight in the kitchen and all of that was blowing up. So I don't even think Nicole and Danny expected what came of all of that. And so they wanted to shift the blame onto David. So then they would have Devon be loyal to them. But then it turned into this whole other thing where now their group of 6 or 4 other people are looking at them thinking, well, they've got this side thing going on over here. And so it really spiraled. And I think both of them were just kind of shocked at the ramifications and the ripple effects that this actually had.
But originally it was designed to keep Devon and Kevin potentially as well close to them. And they're only doing that if they actually want to keep Devon and Kevin in the game, at least temporarily.
Right.
Yeah, but it was also designed it was designed to lie to Devon, because the plan was that Devon, right. But Devon believed what was going to happen was Nicole was going to vote to keep Ian, and then Danny was going to break the tie to keep Ian. So the whole thing was just an absolute made up story, because they were never going to do that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they wanted to
get rid of Ian and keep the committee intact while also building a relationship with Devon and try to keep her as well.
Yes. A relationship built on lies.
But a relationship nonetheless. And ultimately, does it matter?
All right. Well, we can move to Appendix A, which deals with the jury phase of the game. And much the same as last week, nobody chose to get rid of Devon for this reason. Though we did discuss a couple weeks ago how it was one reason she stayed over Bailey, because nobody or a number of people didn't want Bailey in the jury. Devon did talk about jury management in her final speech. and saying she gave the vote to Nicole last time because she stabbed her in the front instead of in the back. And based on what she has now said in interviews, she thinks people like Cody and Tyler have stabbed her in the back this time. So it will be interesting to see how things shake out in the final two.
But she's
yes,
not
I'm
really
very intrigued.
accurate about that, right?
She's not really what?
She's not her reads still are not totally spot on about that kind of stuff, right? Like Memphis didn't backstab her
Right.
the way she thinks.
Right. I mean, Tyler
But what
did,
will be good
but
is the other people come into the jury, and hopefully they'll share information and talk to each other, and she'll be able to sort some of these things out and be vocal about it. That'll be fun
if
to
she
watch.
believes them. If she believes
If she does, that's true.
them. I do think Nicole will be happy to have Devon in the jury, especially without getting any obvious blood on her hands to make it happen. But what was not on the show was that Nicole did reveal she'd been lying about the Ian vote all week, even when Devon begged her to tell the truth for the personal reasons we discussed earlier. So if I were Nicole, I wouldn't necessarily count on getting Devon's vote again this time.
No, and I think she must know that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then I think that was one interesting part about Nicole's goodbye message, which was hopefully after this game is over, we can talk about how we go forward from here. So,
yeah, she certainly wasn't saying, well, you're in the jury house. Think of me.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is about time to wrap things up. So, Adam, what are your final thoughts about Devon?
I saw some tweets of people suggesting that Devon should become the host of Big Brother. And I think that's a great idea. I think Devon's fantastic. I think she definitely made a lot of mistakes in the game, but she's great television. She seems like an incredible person. She, I really think that they should cast more people that stand up on eviction night and give really great speeches. How do we not have more great talkers on reality television? You know what I mean? So many weeks people bumble through that speech, and it's like that should be a requirement to be on Big Brother, that if you're going to be on national television, when you have 30 seconds to speak, you knock it out of the park. I'd like to think that if I were on Big Brother, I would make the most of that time. And too many people are like, I hope that I stay and I love my family and, it is what it is. And I've had such a great time here with you guys this summer. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I love that she's willing to really stand and stand for something and say something meaningful, whether it's game related or whether it's something outside of the game. I don't care. I just want something passionate. And she has that in so many ways, so much passion for the game and for life. So she'll definitely be missed on the show. But I do think if we're talking about why Devon lost, there were a lot of factors that ultimately stem from having this additional burden of playing for more than just trying to win the game. And it's something that other people in the house didn't have. And it does make, I think, the path to the final two more challenging.
I really feel for Devon because she did walk into that house with so much more weight on her shoulders than many people who have to play this game or who have played this game. And so the position that she was in was a hard one because she wanted to take that burden and she wanted to utilize it to be a statement for people who are very similar to her. And she wanted to speak for all of the minorities that we see on programs like this. And she really wanted to represent a group. And unfortunately, it made it more difficult for her to not only play this game, but to win this game. And she gave that very impassioned speech at the end, and it was truly incredible. And I do agree with you, Adam, that should be a requirement. You should be able to stand up and put forth those moments where people just are stunned when they're watching it, because she truly meant everything that she said while she was standing there. She wasn't pleading for them to keep her. She was pleading to the world to look at what is transpiring on these programs and to really be mindful of it, and to know that she walked into this house proud and wanting to represent all of those people who don't have a voice. So kudos for her for standing up and doing that, because you have to respect someone who does that. And I do think that she will be missed. I'm glad that we will see her on the jury. But unfortunately, she did have things working against her. In addition to that, she aligned herself with people that were giving her two different versions of events and were lying to her. We talked a lot about the misreads. I think she tried to sort through the information. She tried to go back and talk to people. But again, she was in a minority group. And so, unfortunately, sharing that information didn't work to her benefit. It worked against her. People found out she was talking, and then they would talk about her. And suddenly, Devon became someone that they wanted to target as opposed to someone they wanted to work with. And she just couldn't get the traction she needed because she bought into this Slick Six group at the beginning that wasn't really a thing. And it was purposely created to control her and to control Bailey. So kudos to them for pulling that off, for actually controlling them in the way that they did. And unfortunately for Devon and Bailey, they fell into it and they believed it. So she just really found herself in a difficult predicament right off the bat and didn't know that she was. She thought that she was in the majority. She thought that she was part of the power group in the house. And it was like the longer the weeks went by, the more she started to realize, wait a second, no, I'm not. This is not working. And she became the go-to person to put on the block. So unfortunately for Devon, we won't get to see her in the final two. I think it would have been an incredible moment for everyone to watch. But I do believe that she is going to be on that list of very strong as well.
Yeah, it is funny when you both talked about being able to stand up and talk, because we had, Christmas, who tried to give her, I don't remember if it was, her poem or, yeah. And then afterwards, she, on the live feed, she was like, oh, everybody's like, oh, you did great, and they're just puffing her up, and she was believing it. Like, oh yeah, I feel like that was my audition to host. And it's just like, oh my Lord. But
Krista said that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a little delusional. But getting back to Devon, she has shown over her 3 seasons that she knows what she's supposed to do. Sometimes putting those theories into action has been a problem. Devon wanted to solve the puzzle, but she wasn't able to find all the pieces or put them in the right position. She believed she was working together with Nicole as an ally. She wasn't. She thought she was in a good alliance with the Slick Six. She wasn't. She thought Danny would work to help her. She wouldn't. She thought David was out to get her. He wasn't. Time after time, we did see Devon a little bit lost in the mist, and that mist severely impacted how she played the game. Devon needed to make a move and start playing much earlier in the game. One by one, her potential allies were sent packing, and she didn't do anything to stop it. Part of it was her incorrect beliefs about where she stood in the game. Part of it was another factor I talked about before, which was the rules we just discussed are the same for everyone. But Adam, as you also said, some have a steeper hill to climb. I noted in Why Bailey Lost that a little bit of sensitivity training before the game clearly was not enough to undo inherent biases that some people may not even realize or want to realize that they have. That continued as time after time, the core Caucasian alliance kept pushing people of color out the door. Devon never saw the whole picture. She didn't realize the overall situation and just how far on the outs she was. She worked with the wrong people, trusting them to do the right thing when that just wasn't going to happen. She thought she had a handle on the puzzle, but it was backwards and upside down, and it's hard to put together a puzzle in the middle of a fog. And that is why Devon lost. So we'll miss her.
Together so nicely. Oh, we will.
I liked why Adam won. I liked that one.
You like that one? Yeah. Well, Jessica even liked her why Jessica lost one.
I did. This is why I am now working with you, is because you became my favorite podcaster during all of that. So yeah, this is how this all started. Why
Now, did you
Jessica
listen?
lost?
I believe you went on a social media hiatus right around this time, but did you listen to why Adam lost?
Oh, me?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
Did I listen to why?
Yeah.
It all blends together.
I do. I do remember videos of you.
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay. I do remember videos of you listening.
For me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Or us for that matter. I remember you. Yeah, listening to the Wandoffs. I think you posted that on social media. You listening to those. But now we do have one more thing we don't normally do for Big Brother here, but I thought, what the heck, let's give it a shot, because we don't normally do predictions because already things have happened on the live feeds, and we don't want to accidentally give away spoilers, for anything that's happened by the time we record. Like last week, we had recorded on a Saturday night, as we do. And quite honestly, by Sunday morning, I knew Devon was going because enough had happened. It was like, well, that's pathetic that we know that already.
Yeah.
But in this case, we're going to have a triple eviction. And so I think we might be able to do a prediction while still avoiding any spoilers. Well, I hope, we'll avoid spoilers. It seems to me that the three who go this Thursday will be Kevin, David, and Danny in some order. And I said, much earlier, I talked about Danny. I mean, Kevin and David are still on the outs, although David may have been brought back in somewhat, but they're on the outs, which is another way of saying they're not white. And nothing that Devon said in her final words penetrated the skulls of the main alliance in that regard. But Danny, I think she has lost so much credibility. We did talk about this earlier, that it's just been her allegiance to the committee that has kept her around. I think they will take this opportunity in the triple to get rid of her with minimal drama.
Well, they're going to have to start going after each other at some point, right? We're getting down in numbers. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see one of them going out as the three, but it would also be very interesting if we see someone like a Kevin win. I'm less convinced that David won't put, Nicole and Danny up, but if Kevin wins, I mean, I'd love to see who Kevin's going to put up. He could definitely cause some fireworks. So I mean, I'm not predicting anything because I'm terrible with predictions and I don't want to mess anything up. The butterfly effect, remember? I caused people to get voted out because I picked them to win, which we didn't do winners here. So that was good too.
Oh, you're right. Well, that's when you go back in time. See, this is happening now. So, you can't.
Well, I do think Kevin is obviously in a bad spot. I mean, Kevin has been put on the block, 4 times now? So, yes. I mean, at some point he's going to be put up and he's going to go home. But they also might realize they could just keep him around because he can always be an option. He's always going to be an option for them. So I'm hoping that we see some fireworks. I'm hoping that we see some interfighting and that some really exciting things happen. But I mean, I do think that there's such control from that group of 6 that I highly doubt that that's going to happen until we get to a point where they have to start shooting at each other.
Danny is in trouble, then is Nicole in trouble as well as the next person, sort of, because she won't be in on it when they get rid of Danny. And anytime you're sort of left out like that, it sort of puts you in danger moving forward. So is that where the hierarchy goes next?
Probably. I would guess yes. So the thing that does somewhat annoy me, and Taryn Armstrong has talked about this, is, Jessica, you talked about the drama of, it'll when it turns, but in this triple eviction, it'll all happen in 1 hour, 2 hours. And I know. So we're going to miss
triple
out.
Eviction. That's crazy.
I think this is a terrible time for a triple eviction. Yes. I mean, if you wanted to speed things up when things were looking sort of stale, the last few weeks would have been a pretty good option. Now that they are forced to pick each other apart, what a terrible time to speed it up. I felt a similar way, like with Millennials versus Gen X, where, I think most people will agree that the early part of the season is a little bit more boring than the home stretch. And yet in the way that they chose to show it on television, the final 8 and the final 7 was 1 hour episode, even though it was strategically super interesting. And the rock draw and when Chris went home was one night, like the night before Thanksgiving. And the whole end game was, and then the finale had 6 people in it, and it was like this.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they do these. Why not speed things up when things are a little more boring? Then the end game is fascinating, especially this is what we've been building to the whole time. This group has to eat each other. We don't really know what's going to happen maybe after the next person or two goes.
Yeah.
And speed that up seems strange.
Yeah, I think on Survivor, they are doing that whole final 6 thing because of the season where they lost so many people to medevacs. Because they were aligned with Aubrey, and anyone who was aligned with Aubrey got, taken out of the game.
I'm saying when you have an edited show where you decide how long the episodes are, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
They chose to do a half-hour episode at the final 8 and the final 7, smush 2 other episodes into one night, when it was really strategically interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't disagree.
That's something we complain about every season, but believe it or not, Jeff Probst doesn't listen to us. I don't understand.
I know he should.
All right. Well, as we're wrapping things up here, I want to mention that although the rules are different for Survivor and Big Brother, behind me is a great depiction of the Survivor rules drawn by Eric Reichenbach. If you're interested, you can get the 11:17 version at tinyurl.com/DavidRulesPoster2. We also have another way to get the rules, so you can always have them with you, and that would be t-shirt form. So just go to robhasawebsite.com or robhasapodcast.com, click on the merch link near the top, and you can find them there.
And if you are outside of the United States and would like to order, you can DM me on my Twitter handle. It is right here at the bottom. And I will certainly work out the shipping with you, and we can get that to you wherever you are outside of the United States.
Does Eric take commission on each one of these?
No, not on these. He doesn't.
Not anymore. I had to purchase the actual artwork from him, so we have the rights of the artwork. Yes.
So you bought the rights.
Yes.
I was wondering. I was like, how are you able to sell somebody's art?
Yeah.
So we've also promoted other stuff that Eric has done. I bought a shirt, and I bought something else that we'll talk about on a future podcast.
I know. I'm still waiting to reveal.
Still waiting on that one, but. So actually, I think you're Adam. I think you're on here. I think that because here's this one of Jessica. She's on the rules. So I think you're one of these people that are just like stick figures in the background.
Probably.
He's one of the happier ones because he got the right color rock.
I'm on this. No, I was not happy at all. I'm on this one. Look at that.
Oh, wow.
That is great.
Nice.
That's so good.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure I was pretty unhappy then.
No, you were. I know you were.
Suggest.
Not quite as unhappy.
You gave me a hug before I left, so I remember that. So thank you.
Which was, of course, cut out.
Yeah.
Well, of course, because we never spoke, right? We never had a conversation out there.
Except we were saying that we can't vote out Jay. That was the only time I think they showed us. Why not? I want to vote out Jay.
Yeah.
Editing.
Yes.
Crazy.
Well, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Once you join, you'll see all the great perks Rob has for patrons, including tons of opportunities to interact with Rob, both on call-in shows and just all sorts of stuff. He has a new 1 hour call-in show before each eviction episode now. And so it's just all sorts of stuff for all the patrons. And of course, there's the Facebook groups as well. So remember, again, to go to robhasawebsite.com/patron. And once you get to the groups, make sure to say hello to Jessica and I.
And also, you should follow us on Twitter. I am at Jessica Lewis 89, as I indicated before, right over there. And he is at David Bloomberg, and also at Adam Scott Klein down below us. You should also follow him too on Twitter. Follow everybody because you get all of the great content we tweet throughout the week. In addition to Big Brother, we tweet about other things. If Survivor ever comes back, we get to also tweet about Survivor. So you should follow us all at Jessica Lewis 89, at David Bloomberg, and at Adam Scott Klein.
Oh, great. Does this mean I'm going to get Big Brother fans in my mentions?
You might. You might.
As one, I can say we are the worst.
He's passing judgment.
Yes. Yes.
Totally.
Yes.
Totally.
Now, Adam, where else can people find
Ruin next?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where else can people find you and the other things you're working on? Obviously, you're not doing any more coin flip trips right about now in the middle of the pandemic. So
I wish. But they can still go watch the coin flip trip on YouTube, which I think is criminally underviewed, if I may say so myself. Very highly, not criminally underrated, rated very highly, 5 stars on in my mind.
It is pretty fascinating what you pull off, I must say. I'm like pretty impressed that some of the things that you managed to actually make happen. I think people should watch. They should definitely watch.
One of the best things I've ever created in my life.
That's awesome.
It was just so much fun, and every episode was like a whole new, different, wild adventure all around the world. So check that out. We flip it a coin in every city to determine if I got $500 a day or $25 a day, and that just like made for some wild adventures. So yeah, still check that out, even though it's already aired. But I'm doing some streaming on Twitch at Soul Survivor Adam, because Survivor Adam was taken. Once this pandemic is over, the next step for me is I'm going to be diving into the world of reality television production.
Ooh.
Really?
Well, it's easy for me to say without a job right now. I do not have a job in reality TV production, but I've always believed that you put things out into the universe that you want, that you dream of, and they start to happen. So I think I love these games, and I love these concepts, and I love coming up with ideas, and I've always been fascinated with the production side of how these things work and the decisions that go into how to air them and all of those things. And so I think it's the logical next step for my life and my career to try my hand. And I love like interviewing people and having to, those conversations about life and strategy and it fascinates me, and it always has. And I've done a little bit of it between the coin flip trip, and I made my own version of The Mole back in 2009. And those are the times when I'm like the most alive. I have so much fun doing that stuff. So that's the next step for me. And the last thing is I've started a casting coaching business as well. So if you go to my website, adamklein.com/casting, you can find information on casting coaching that I've been getting into and really having a good time with. And I found that I'm quite okay at that as well.
Nice. Good for you.
Quite okay.
Quite okay.
Quite okay.
Very okay.
He gives himself 5 stars.
Well, it could be out of 10. 5 could be very mediocre, but this time
5 out of 5.
This time, fortunately, it is out of 5. So,
yes. All right. Well, we need a hashtag. I don't know if either of you have any suggestions for a hashtag. I had either I had the Power Duo, Lost in the Mist. That one was a little harsh. Yeah,
that's a little.
That was a little harsh. I have no idea. I'm trying to think of anything.
Well, I think with
Power Duo.
Power Duo, it describes you two.
Yeah,
yeah.
Definitely not me and David.
Yeah, no. Although this was your idea originally.
Definitely not David and anybody if we're talking about Big Brother.
That's true.
Yeah, well, that David. Yes.
Yes. I like Power Duo. That works.
All right. So, of course, there's the hashtag for the podcast overall, YXLost. Everyone should make sure you subscribe to all of the RHAP Big Brother podcasts at robhasawebsite.com/BB podcast or on your favorite podcatcher. We are also on the Reality TV RHAP Ups feed. So if you subscribe to that feed, you get this, you get our Survivor podcasts eventually, you get whatever we end up doing in the meantime, and so much more. So in a week, we will be right back here to discuss Big Brother, and we will have our guest in this triple eviction, 3 players to discuss. Our guest will be someone who is used to doing a ton of Big Brother coverage, and his name is Bill Hammond. And he used to recap most of the live feeds for me when I was running reality news online. So people who are watching this, listening to this, are probably familiar with Taryn Armstrong, obviously, who does all the live feeds for RHAP. Bill was kind of like my Taryn before, years and years ago when there wasn't podcasting, and he would do so many of the live feeds. So he's going to be here to help us make our way through 3 different people.
It's a good thing you didn't pick me for that one, because it would have been a 9-hour podcast.
Yeah.
That is true. We are going on 2 hours now, so we appreciate it, though. It's probably close. Yeah, I think that's close for sure. Going 2 hours, being a record.
Oh yeah. I mean, for Big Brother, it's definitely a record. For Survivor,
Yes.
we've had longer ones.
Setting records. I can't help myself.
Yeah. Hey, it's fine.
It's great.
That's why you're here. So I do want to say a special thank you, Adam, for coming here today, and for planting the idea in my mind, even if you don't remember planting the idea in my mind.
Yes.
I'm glad that I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm glad that you did too. It was so great to actually get to see you again, Adam, and to chat with you. Thank you for joining us. I really had a great time. Thank you to Scott St. Pierre, who does all of the editing on the Big Brother podcasting and all of the Why Blank Lost that we do as far as this is concerned. So he does both the audio and video. So thank you for all of the work that you do, Scott. And thank you to Will from America for the incredible theme song that you did create that is on the audio version of the Why Blank Lost podcast. So thank you, Will, for that wonderful little theme song that mentions both of us. It's quite nice. So thank you both for all of the great work you do. And again, thank you, David, for putting this all together. And Adam, you were so much fun. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yes. And also thank you, Jessica, for another great week. All right. We will see everyone back here in 1 week for the triple. So bye.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah.